Hello. Today we're going to be talking about the kind of reading personal training slash consulting slash whatever I'm calling it. I'm offering why I think it needs to exist. We'll talk a little bit about reading being a system. We'll talk about how we get in our own way. We'll talk about the idiosyncratic processes of reading per person, and then what you might expect on a call with me. So I wanted to make this video because both to help myself clarify, but also to address what I'm trying to accomplish with a personal training for reading. Because, it's one of those things where it's kind of a little bit abstract. Like what might someone expect? Because reading is a kind of a lifelong journey. There's the mechanical skill of reading, and then there's the kind of emotional connection that we have to reading, the books that we choose to read, the connection to the libraries that we have, the friends that we meet in book clubs, yada 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 yada. Our self-perception from the literature that we choose to read. Do we consider ourselves fiction readers, nonfiction readers, all of this? I want to start with computer science, weirdly. So having studied computer science academically does a few things to your brain. It allows you to take these kind of opaque abstract objects and turn them into abstractions. So as a person, you have a name, you have an age, you have a height, you have a weight, you have a hair color. All of these things become attributes in an object-oriented programming language, like class person in a Java file, for example. Connection, human connection, becomes a WebSocket between two kind of things. These things that are kind of very humanistic become very kind of Claude Shannon kind of methodology messaging, where it's kind of like this idea of like, well, what does this mean in terms of like information at the level of information and noise? And I think that the way this relates to reading in particular is that reading is a system too. All books are just collections of words. And I think that we get emotional about these things when instead we can get really pragmatic about reading as a term of like stocks and flows and feedback mechanisms to understand what we're trying to do while we're reading. And I think that like when you think of, Siddhartha versus East of Eden versus The Great Gatsby, there are these three very different kind of narratives, these three very different stories. Siddhartha and Great Gatsby, for example, one is about, becoming enlightened, and the other is about becoming enlightened through wealth. I guess they're both kind of about the same thing, enlightenment through wealth, where Siddhartha, sits by the river and becomes, he gets I forget the name of the woman that he does his sexual growth with, but and then for Great Gatsby, the kind of Jay Gatsby hosting these crazy parties, but kind of being removed from them as a very kind of enlightened, or at least in the American sense. The thing is, though, if you turn these books into a array of words and then you just replace them one by one and then throw out the extra if it's a bigger book, what you get is like a Ship of Theseus one-for-one book replacement. So if I had like a Siddhartha to Gatsby file in JavaScript, I could literally go word 0 replace with this word 1 replace with this word, and eventually what you would have is you would have half Siddhartha, half Great Gatsby, and then you keep going, and then you get all Great Gatsby. So I think that is a good example of the point that I'd like to try and get across with my reading systems, is that I think that we shoot ourselves in the foot in a lot of ways. We create bad reading systems because we're obsessed with really dumb things. We have this weird guilt completion thing attached to the books that we read. We don't ask questions when we go into whatever book we read. We romanticize the notion of being a reader, as opposed to understanding that being a reader is kind of hard work, and that it involves a certain level of movement or motion. We don't want to read multiple books at the same time for some reason. A lot of people are stuck on reading physical books instead of digital books, which is a big thing that I talk about in my process of, well, you can do both, and it's like this becomes this kind of almost like religious kind of fervor against technology. Even though the ergonomics of digital reading are just so much better. You can change the font size, the weight, it doesn't weigh down on your back, but you're like, but I need to turn the pages, right? Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about here. There is a very real system at play here when we think about reading as a system of comprehension and throughput. If we think about seeing the number of ideas that we're going to come across in our lifetime as being greater or less than because of our efforts, being able to read well is very important. Being able to read well will give you a leg up in understanding concepts about the world that doesn't belong to you, that never has belonged to you and won't belong to you, but it'll allow you to contribute and understand at a deeper level. So the three things that make a reading system are the books, obviously, the reader, which is yourself, and a commonplace, which is kind of an external system that you have to do thinking about the books that you're reading, whether that's something as simple as a kind of just journal where you're highlighting kind of quotes, or all the way up to this extensive spaced repetition system where you have flashcards and you're quizzing yourself every day, or maybe even a YouTube channel. In a way, this YouTube channel is my commonplace. Like I'm using it in the other videos on this channel to discuss the different forms that reading takes in the books and how these ideas interact with each other, because I'm a big fan of parallel reading. So I think that, the reason that I'm wanting to do consulting, and that's really largely the purpose of this channel right now, is to set up this kind of personal training flow where people sign up, maybe yourself, if you're still watching this, and kind of wanting to kind of talk about this, is because I do think that there's a number of strategies that you could go about here. You could make broad videos with broad advice that should apply to most people, like how to read multiple books at once, or how to ask better questions, or how to learn how to skim. These are things that most people can learn. But then I think there's these kind of idiosyncratic things, these habits that we've developed over time that are similar to kind of like things that you would get out of a personal trainer in the gym, where they're like, hey, this is the problem with your form in particular. This is the problem with your reading setup. This is like the relationship that you have to your phone or to social media, for example. Or maybe it's your inability to read one type of book over another type of book. You just refuse to touch fiction because you're a grinder and you think that everything has to be nonfiction, or you refuse to touch nonfiction because you think that they have their heads up their asses and that there's no way that it could be interesting as a fictional world. Both of these aren't really helpful ways of thinking. So being able to get out of your own way, I think, does involve some level of idiosyncratic conversation. It involves being able to say, let's take a look at what you are dealing with and where we want you to go in terms of your system of comprehension and throughput as a reader. So finally, I'll end this video to say what you might expect on a call. So what you might expect on a call is, if you fill out the form below, the two questions that I have are, where are you currently and where do you want to be? And kind of like both of those questions will allow me to kind of like figure out, okay, well, it seems that like this could probably be helpful to you, like adding, again, like a certain form of digital reading or parallel reading to your reading workflow, or audiobooks, or it might be helpful for most people to come up with a better common placing system. I think that that's a huge upgrade for most people, something that works for them, something, whether it's like, again, notes on your phone or manual analog. I actually do like analog common placing, and I'll talk about that in maybe a more appropriate video at a different point. But again, just the way that it works with the brain of short-term memory, long-term memory, kind of like, how do we get you the goals that we want you to achieve with the books that you want to read. And 60 books a year, the name of this channel, is apt because it's basically, well, it's something that I do, but it's also one of these things that I feel is possible for us who are literate, and not only possible, but important and relevant for us to be informed individuals of the society that we live in, and give us that nuance and allow us to engage with each other at a level that makes sense. Some of the other videos on this channel you'll see are me doing that. It's me grappling with ideas imperfectly from the books that I've read and have kind of captured the ideas that I think are interesting or necessary to my understanding of myself and the world that I live in, and I kind of chew through those ideas in video form. But I think that's just one way of many. There's artistic ways of making collages that represent the books that you read. There's teaching through clubs. There's interpretive dances that you could do probably from books you read. Books are an extremely fluid medium, and you're going to read so few books over the course of your life. So doing it correctly is really important. Again, 60 books a year, let's just say 50, because 50 makes for easier math. Let's say that you can read for 50 years of your life, right? So you start heavily reading 50 books a year at the age of 20 and you live till 70. That means that you will read in total 2,500 books total. There are millions of books in production. Of course, not all of them are good, but the important point is that you won't see most of the books that will ever exist. They will not come across your plate. So being able to become a better reader, to give yourself a better system, gives yourself a better shot at making those 2,500 books matter. Making sure that you choose the right 2,500 books, making sure that you understand those 2,500 books, making sure that you can use them in your life and synthesize them. So that's why I want to do reading personal training. And if that is interesting to you, fill out the form in the description below, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks.